During the pandemic, it was probably a kind of a very feast type period for the 3PLs, at least the ones that could provide those capabilities. And now I think we're seeing it's a little bit harder for them to find new business.
I so apologize for that. Sorry if I know I was apologizing to the sound guys. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the rise of the 3PL, right?
Mm.
So you guys have been through it, right, from the 90s to today. So just kind of talk about kind of what the 3PL market was like then, what you saw then, you know, and then just draw parallels to today and what we look to bring to 3PL to help solve their issues.
Yeah. I mean, when I think back about the 3PLs, the early days of 3PLs, I think there was a little bit of a naivete maybe about technology and solutions and how they approach things where I certainly remember in the early days kind of a cycle where 3PLs would say, well, we're going to develop our own technology. And then they'd try that for a while and they'd say, oh, that's not good. I'm going to go get a vendor to try. Oh, that's too expensive. I'm going to, try to do my own technology. And I think one of the biggest changes that I see today is that I don't know about you, but they're not in that cycle anymore. The 3PLs are largely connected to a couple, 2 or 3 vendors. They've segmented up their business as to who they kind of work with as a partner. And at varying levels, they're, somewhere along the spectrum of being really tech forward, solution forward to being, maybe a little less progressive. And that's the difference between today and what I remember.
Yeah, I think that's true. I remember those, some of the early system or guys that we worked with, right? They had their own WMS, which was, to your point, like some degree of functionality that they had that they could do. But I think a lot of those guys did sort of what McHugh did in the old days, is they sort of treated it like a project, right? They were like, treated everything like a project. They do a little doodad that they needed to do for that. And they built this oddly shaped, functionality. And I think we still find, every once in a while, we still find a 3PL that is coming off an old legacy system that they developed in the 90s or something like that. But that's getting more rare. I think that, to your point, I mean, as you know, 3PLs, they make their hay by, on the operations side, right? And the technology side is something that they're not developers, right? They're, good, the best of them adopt, a strong technology piece to them, but they're not the folks that are out there developing that, right? They just don't have the skill set or they got biz to transact, really, right? So they're out there selling stuff, and they want to be, the best ones are going to be tech forward, but that means they're adopting technology, right, in the right pieces of their offerings, right, and leading with that.
And they understand the importance of kind of translating the operational need into the solution need, I guess, is that whole business analyst, that function of, hey, this is what I really need it to do, and now I can go out to automation, partners, solution partners, whoever it is, tech partners, and translate that requirement into action plans. And I think the best ones find good partners to kind of do their work for them, with them, and just make the most of that situation.
Yeah, and I think that back then, I think that a lot of those guys were really contract-oriented folks, right? They would basically, for a big 3PL, CPG company, they'd take on the distribution, and it was just one customer per building. And really, that's how the model started in a lot of their cases, right? They were just doing contract sites, right? And so they do them cost plus or whatever that, would allow them to get in the door. And as that business, the 3PL business, matured to say, look, we have an offering, like we have a building, right? That's an asset that now we want to use for multiple customers, right? When that came along, and I think that came along really starting in the 2000s, mid 2000s, where that, multi-customer approach to 3PL, that completely changed everything, because now the anybody who built that legacy system around contract buildings, the game is much different when you're in a multi-customer building, where you have to have flows that are different per customer. You have to, have, people that, maybe are focused on a customer, or maybe people that flip back and forth, and be able to do that in a way that captures time and all the rest of that jazz. That completely changed the game, having multi-customer buildings. And when the 3PLs started to have those assets they build, now you see them advertise they got this many square feet, thousands of square feet, whatever. When that started happening, and then they went to that model, that completely changed the requirements of what a good WMS is going to do, and I think got a lot of them out of that, the old legacy.
Yep. And then you fast forward another, chunk of years, and you get to the pandemic, which caused this explosion of package delivery, right? Everything was direct to consumer, and so the 3PLs that really reacted to that well with their solutions, and not only having multiple clients in a building, but being able to leverage the process flows, whatever their equipment, their automation, right, to deal with that influx of direct to consumer. They've really done well.
Yeah, and the side effect of that was all that shift toward that then caused availability of resources to be in those warehouses to become a shortage. So now you had a workforce shortage that corresponded to the growth of those sorts of DCs popping up, and so it sort of fed on itself a bit. That now, not only is it harder to do the business, it's harder to keep the folks that drive the business, because folks, team members will go across the street for 5 cents an hour, especially if there's better ergonomics or better quality of life on the other side of the street, right? So for them to keep those folks is really even more challenging now, right after the pandemic, right?
Which feeds into one of the other things we talked about, which is the whole influx of automation and
right,
robotics, because you have to fill that gap with people. And then I think now in today, it feels to me like some of that, maybe some of the bigger shippers are pulling maybe some of that direct-to-consumer operation back internally. So it feels a little, during the pandemic, it was probably a kind of a very feast type period for the 3PLs, at least the ones that could provide those capabilities. And now I think we're seeing it's a little bit harder for them to find new business. And now in present day, I think it's a little less robust with new customers, because some of those operations that are direct to consumer, I think they're pulling those operations back internally as opposed to outsourcing them to 3PLs.
Yeah, I think that, but that also I think is led to the folks that have a better tech discipline, right? They should be on the leading edge of that, where a direct shipper, is maybe wading into a certain technology or whatever. Having a 3PL that's doing that already, that gets you that economy, right? That gets you the advantage from a scalability perspective. Those are the ones that are going to keep those customers. Those are the ones that are going to, in my opinion, because it's hard for a direct shipper, unless they have a pretty massive size, really to be able to attack the technology like some of the 3PLs are, right, from the perspective of trying different things and moving the needle more. And I think that's that, and along with the fact that they make their bones from the perspective of operations, really having strong execution, and folks in the direct shipping world, where that's just another thing that they have to do. It's a different game, right? It's not, the 3PLs, I think, can be much more disciplined about everything that goes into the distribution side of the fence. Those two things, the operational excellence that you can achieve with a good WMS and good, processes in place, the ability to adopt automation over multiple customers and spread the capital costs over a bunch of customers really gives them a nice advantage. The 3PLs that aren't just focused on operational excellence and maybe are a little bit behind technology, I think are going to be the ones that suffer from what you're saying, is that we see some of those direct shippers pulling that distribution back.
Yep. And have you seen, past this prologue, have you seen anybody in your recent travels of 3PLs that are saying, oh, I'm gonna write my own WMS. I'm gonna start from scratch and build my own WMS?
No. Everybody knows how difficult it is. It's easy to do easy things, right? And what happens, especially on a 3PL, like if you have multiple customers asking for all different things, you got these crazy workflows that are, competing against each other for space in the warehouse, like, not only just, rack space, but consolidation locations, pack stations, right? It's a finely grained orchestration to get all that stuff working correctly, and the amount of time that it takes to develop something that can do that is difficult. So I think everybody's looked at that and said, look, we make our money by executing really well and applying technology really well, and optimizing resources. We don't have the time to contemplate, oh, I want to do allocation this way for a customer that needs this. That's where folks like us come into play.
So what's interesting is this picture.
Oh my God.
Yeah. What year is this?
That is 2001.
2001.
Yeah, I have to know because that's the night of my wedding. Yeah.
That's your wedding.
That's some snazzy dress.
Yeah, exactly.
Snazzy outfits.
A lot of bling.
Yeah,
a lot of bling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Come on, you got to bling up for a wedding.
Yeah, and we wanted to go with something that was different.
It's a thing of beauty. It's a thing
Yeah,
of beauty.
it is.
But this is
Look how dark my hair was too. Holy moly.
Good.
And I still didn't have any hair. So.
That's such a great shot. But that is, so you mentioned the move from kind of contract sites to multi-tenant.
Yeah.
And that requires a different kind of architecture, right? A kind of a foundation. And what we see today is a lot, those systems that were in place today are what we're seeing in the market being replaced.
Yeah.
Coming to market now with those, so talk a little bit about that multi-tenant complexity that.
Yeah, I mean, when we originally, so Jim and I were we were the original architects of the 3PL system that we created. And we really, at the time, back then, everything was contract-based. So this was early 2000, everything was contract-based. And so we handled the contract side of logistics just fine. What we didn't contemplate really well, was the fact that in a multi-tenant, in a multi-customer environment, you're going to have different flows going different directions, and then all the configuration sort of has to split. And so I think that the newer systems, certainly our system is great at saying, okay, is this a warehouse level? Is this a business unit? So a customer level? Is this a building level? What is the level that we need to have the configuration set to? Yeah. Because that's the key, right? Is the business, a business unit might want its, value-added services or some other kind of process in place, and the next business next to it doesn't. And you might have, apparel, which has its own problems, and then discrete, hard goods next to that have their own problems. So all those things are things that are really difficult to do that, frankly, we didn't even contemplate back then. We were just like, hey, let's make it so that we can track time and bill it, and stuff like that, and allow somebody to run a network that had multiple customers, one per building. But as I was saying, you got to treat that square footage really as an asset, right, to those guys. And so the square footage needs to be split as best they can. And sometimes a customer will be big enough where we'll just give them their own building, if it's especially a CPG customer or something like that. But more like we're seeing, especially on direct-to-shipper stuff, is that we can get many, especially with dense storage systems in place, we can get many, many customers in one building, and that's something that we did not contemplate back in the day. And I think our configurations do a much better job, our current way of thinking.
But to the question, the question says, well, why can't you just pop that into your system? And it starts structurally with ownership of the inventory, right? You have multiple customers in the same facility. Some of the inventory is owned by one of the customers, some's owned by a different customer. You have visibility, you got to restrict visibility.
Exactly.
And then to your point, all the operational flows. Ideally, what you do is, kind of what we've done, which is you have building level flows, but then you can supersede those with different flows or rules at the business unit level or at the client level inside the warehouse.
Yeah.
But then you can leverage, in some of the current implementations, if you have a robotic, goods to person, or you have some kind of automation in there, you can leverage that and share that resource between BUs. You can consolidate the picks. You can run, one client through a print and apply, right in front of a different client and just print a different label format. So you want to get all of that leverage out of the equipment you purchase.
Yeah, that's
as
an
a
awesome
3PL.
Yeah, that's an awesome example, because in direct-to-consumer shipping, the first thing that we often do when we do a setup is we basically pull the singles. So all the singles would be single line, single item orders, right? Because you could batch those together and pick those as one big pick, and then bring them over to a pack station, and then just bam, 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 bam. And you could actually, because you could be picking for multiple customers if you have multiple customers shipping that way. And we just basically, the next time you do a ship, you might get a different pack slip, you might get a different, so we can optimize that. And that is something that used to be impossible, frankly, in a lot of the WMSs. And it's something that's really a requirement now if you're doing direct to consumer shipping, because like I said, the first thing that you do is say, we optimize the singles and, try and go after that. And then for multi-item orders, then you've got a different problem, because you could still batch pick, you could still cluster pick them together potentially, right? Or not. If you're tracking labor, discretely by customer, you might say, okay, we're going to not do that. But again, the configuration should allow you to mix and match, right?
Yep.
They're asking for speed and flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? To grow and onboard new customers in varieties of verticals.
Mm-hmm.
So how does Softeon, how do we help them tackle that, right? We've got the foundation, we've got the approach, we've got the technology. How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, it starts with the infrastructure and the basic concepts of having a multi-client facility, which we've talked about. But then when it comes to onboarding new clients, I think one of the key things that we built over time is this configuration utility, the configurator. And it is really good at taking either an environment that you set up as a templated environment, or we'll ask you scripted questions and we'll build out a configuration.
Yeah, our customer that's kind of close to
Yep.
the business process of
Yep.
a previous one. Yeah, so.
And that's a process that can substantially cut down the time it takes for setup and preparing. I mean,
Yeah.
some of our best in class 3PL partners they'll onboard a new client in 7 days, and they'll be shipping in 32 days,
Yeah, exactly.
which is a fraction of what it used to be.
Right. Well, I think that there's two parts to that, really, right? Is the configurator is a big part of that, to be able to have either start with a golden template and then use that, or start with a customer that's similar and start with that. But then, and there's some WMSs that have that. The part that people are often missing is okay, materialize that into something, right? You can say, okay, I want to do that. Okay, fine. And then, but to be able to copy that and actually do that in one step is where I think we put a lot of time in the last 2 years to get all that stuff working. So you can say, okay, copy these things, but don't copy these things. Okay, go. And then it creates that configuration. Whereas, my history with doing other WMSs is like, I could see that stuff and I had to build my own tools to, I could say, okay, I had a template. I need to build my own tools to extract that data, bootstrap a new instance. And then you're stuck with testing it, right? And getting it just the basic part of receiving, put away, and picking done. That's weeks and weeks of work, right? Typically. And so I think the work that we've done on the data copy side is really the part that is unique for us, right? Is that taking that golden instance or that instance and saying, okay, do that now, press the go button, and then create those configurations, and then allow yourself to then go instantly into validation mode. That's a big deal. And that's the part that people, I think, that's the people that struggle with most. They struggle with that part the most. And I think it's the part that we've probably put the most homework into over the last couple of years.
Yep, very true.
Yeah, we get, we show customers or potential customers today that 3PL configurator, there's this moment of silence where they go, oh my gosh. Like it's like the light bulb goes on for them when it talks about speed and how quickly they can get new customers on board.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like much when you talk about it. You say, oh, well, I just go grab these templated pieces and move them over there. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And if you don't have it, you sure miss it. So.
Yeah, and it really, like you said, I mean, previous, to us coming on with Softeon, we would literally spend weeks and weeks and weeks just getting to the point where we could start to test, right? And it's a big deal.
Yeah. And then another piece of 3PL complexity is it's not just a warehouse. It's a pharmaceutical warehouse. It's a high-tech warehouse. It's an omni-channel warehouse. It's a automotive warehouse. How do we allow customers, how do we provide that kind of flexibility and configurability across those industries?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it comes down to, again, having the rules defined at the client level inside of a building so that you can have a high-tech, electronics company as one of your clients and you're tracking serialization on their product next to somebody that's, case lot level. That's very doable in our solutions. I mean, pharma's a whole different animal, right? Pharma has compliance and validation rules that are really complex, and it's part of what we do. That you're either in that market and you do it as a 3PL or you don't, and it's part of the solution, the validation that gives you the capabilities to be in that market.
Yeah, I would actually take it a step back on, when I thought about the question there, I was thinking, really it starts with a foundation of really strong, diverse functionality, right? And so I think what happens is, especially on maybe the smaller end or the, one size fits all web-based, WMS products or whatever, I think that as you go up into the complications and the multiple complications across a facility, they get really thin, right? And so you look at our history of being first to the cloud, first to the web, first to the cloud. We've been doing this, for a long time, in the cloud since 2012 or whatever, before people were out there. I think that, we have all that functionality and then team that with the ability to do those configurations at the business unit level or the building level. I mean, that's the key, is that to have that, but then to be able to apply it in targeted ways. I think those two things are the key.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We've got 25 plus years of breadth and depth of functionality that is all part of this solution that you just don't build it up. If you've not been around a long time, you can't have that level of capability. It's not possible.
So where does it, the 3PL market's gone, it's, for 30 years and it's still growing. There was Gartner's report came out recently and this market is still continuing to grow. Where do you think it goes from here from a in-need standpoint, reflecting on kind of a WMS, foundation?
Yeah. I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think there are plenty of businesses out there that look at their operations and say, I'm not an operational expert. Now I've got all these other kind of influences coming in, whether it's labor market challenges, I got the automation subsystems, I've got, and if you don't have an engineering and operational expertise in your company, if it's not part of your core ability, I think you're going to be forced to go find a 3PL partner. It'll be your better option to go find a 3PL. So I think the 3PL business is going to grow and thrive. I think it will bifurcate a little bit into the ones that are tech forward and understand that the better that they can consume technology and leverage it for their own good by finding partners and taking that lead of the translation of operational needs to business rules for the solution. Those 3PLs who have good partners are going to continue to accelerate, and I think they'll just take more of their fair share of the business. The smaller or the less tech-forward 3PLs will struggle. I think they'll find niche markets and customers that they can apply their business to, but wouldn't see them growing as robustly.
Yeah, and I also think that, if you think about what's gone on in the market for the last 5 to 10 years, right? The different channels that we can get orders, right, through is vastly changed. I mean, we have situations where we have out there, we have influencers that are now part of a marketing program to sell goods, and the influencers will get like an outfit or get a thing to promote or get a thing to wear, and then boom, we get a bunch of orders, right? And we get those orders from different channels and things like that. I think that part of the technology is not just on the WMS side, but really on like the myriad of different ways that now we can get orders from people through different means, different, setups, Shopify to homegrown things to, some kind of influencer has a page that, then boom, pummels orders to us or to the 3PL. And I think the 3PLs, because they can be out there and share that across multiple customers, right? And share the knowledge across those multiple customers, share that technology across multiple customers, they're going to be very prepared. Because think about that from a direct shipper's perspective, how many things you'd have to know if you start to get into that world of multiple points of entry for your orders. And, since, obviously we have great solutions around that, but it is a different animal. I think starting from orders and getting to shipments, as we said about automation too, is like that is changing, right? Automation is changing, but just the idea that, we have this order processing system is going to give us the order. That's not the world today. That still is part of the world, but we might have all kinds of different channels that we're getting orders from, right? We have to get those handled, and they might have their own discrete ways of shipping, and this customer might get these channels, this customer, which means that maybe they get the big glob once a week or something like that, depending on how their influencers are out there. There's just a lot of things that I think is going to change the way everybody looks at things. I think the 3PLs have an advantage because they can share the cost of, implementing that stuff over multiple customers. And for somebody to take on that in a direct shipper world it's going to be difficult to keep up against 3PLs that know what they're doing.
It'll be interesting to see which companies are still out there using their supply chain, their logistics as a strategic weapon.
Yeah.
So you look at somebody like Amazon, and they're just a logistics. Well, I shouldn't say they're a logistics company. That's what they do, and the better they can, build solutions specific for them, the better off they are. And then you see somebody like IKEA, who buys some technology, and it makes me wonder: is there something so unique about their operation that they feel they must build their own logistics platform? Because that's certainly what they're going to do.
Right, exactly.
And maybe it's got to do with the just the nature of getting multiple pieces for furniture and assembling, and kits, and that. But I don't.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to ponder about who's left trying to do everything themselves, and who's out there leveraging the best 3PL partners or others to do the job.
Right.
In a previous episode, we talked about kind of integrating robotics and WES and those kind of things. Is it harder for a 3PL to do that, considering the different workflows and things that they do, or is it more important for them to be better at that?
Well, I mean, I think it's more important for them to be better at it, because if you think about, like, from their perspective, like, this is all about cost to serve versus revenue, right? And so if they have a better cost to serve model, applying robots or applying technology in certain areas, right, that it allows them to increase their profitability. So they just have to be, since that's what they're making a living doing. A direct to shipper, the shipping part of that is just a piece of what they're doing, right? And they're making revenue on the actual item. So the 3PLs are making a living just doing the logistics part. So they just have to be better at it. Now, I think that a lot of these customers that we've seen, they start off applying a technology for a particular customer that has a particular scalability problem to solve. And then once they get it in, then they can start to leverage it across multiple different customers, which is an advantage for them because they can basically use one customer to prove it out and make sure that they have that process down, and then just apply it as needed across multiple customers. So it gives them a unique advantage because they're not necessarily all in on the bet, right? They can just start with one customer, move that technology in. The rest of your customers maybe stay conventional or stay with other technology. And they have the ability, now not to say that they're in the business of letting that one customer die in the vine if the technology doesn't work. It's just a risk profile thing, right? I think they just have a nice advantage.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. They've got a unique position to be able to test these kind of different automation pieces, and because they've got a wider variety of operational needs and clients and different flows, and they can look and say, ooh, if I can get this type of thing to work, I can use it across these 5 business units. Right. That's good for me. Where if you're the end shipper, you only have 1/5 of that opportunity, maybe.
Exactly.
Just, depends. But I think it is. It's kind of a bit of they've got the operational breadth and variability to better leverage.
Right.
Yeah. One thing you said that I liked was this kind of, they're not operating in vacuums, right? They're part of an ecosystem. And as you guys know, we had a number of our customers that were involved in one of the largest product launches this year together, where orders were coming from different areas that had to be coordinated together. And these are different standalone companies that were part of the same product launch. So, I think that's a great example of, they've got to be more nimble and more agile, and because they're not standalone, right? They've got to be part of an ecosystem.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really interesting too, because you're talking about media plus apparel, and coming from all kinds of different directions, orders coming from, different directions. So that was certainly, really a difficult problem, to solve. We have all the pieces to solve it, but that's not going to be a unique problem going forward. As I was talking about, this idea of different channels and all that stuff, that's going to be the status quo. That's not going away. Influencers are not going away. The way that, people operate, doing product drops instead of almost like media drops, like in the old days, right? Albums would come out on Tuesdays, right? Or, and so, this idea of product drops coming from influencers and all that is new, but it's really effective from a marketing perspective. At least it seems to be at this point, and it's not going away. It just makes the challenge from a scalability perspective, but as you were saying, from a coordination perspective, a lot more difficult. And so that's a game changer in our logistics world, because it puts a lot of pressure on the systems, puts a lot of pressure on scalability, puts a lot of pressure on just, how much you do with human team members versus technology.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, the volume of orders, that was a media drop, that specific example, and it was such a massive amount of work in week, 10 days.
Yeah.
And like anything or other products that are media influenced products, I think it's an opportunity. You ship that product out, or you miss some of that opportunity.
Yeah.
And companies don't want to miss that opportunity, so you have to be able to deliver.
Well, in fact, it's worse than that, because if you don't make that opportunity work for a consumer, fairly likely they're never coming back to you as a site, right? So that opportunity, turns into lost opportunity cost in the future if you don't satisfy their orders, right? So I think it's a pretty massive problem. It's something that we executed extremely well. It was media, and it was, T-shirts and other apparel items and accessories and, all that stuff coming together and, getting shipped out like literally in a couple days was amazing.
Yeah, it reminds me of during the World Cup, and my son and I were following it remotely, and I said, I'm going to go out online, found jerseys, for the team we were following, one for him, one for me. Ordered those, they were whatever, something got back ordered, this, that, boom, went on for like 2 weeks. And then, they finally came and said, this is on back order. And I said, yeah, I don't want it anymore, cancel it. And they were expensive. and it's just lost opportunity because they couldn't deliver that product.
Yeah.
Speaking of media, so what, for our millions of viewers out there, what is one concert that you guys have been to that would surprise somebody?
Oh, let me think about that.
I don't know if it surprised everybody, but I've been to the Police at Alpine Valley in a cast. That's a different story.
I don't know that I have anything that would surprise anybody. My favorite band in the 90s was 10,000 Maniacs. So I bet I went to see them. No, I bet I went to see them 5 times. Like, so I was a maniac. Yeah, I was a maniac in the 90s.
You're a maniac for the Maniacs.
So yeah, that might surprise somebody, but yeah, I was a 10,000 Maniac guy. So yeah, Natalie Merchant and the crew. So yeah, that might